Hi, this is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6 Delta Alpha Yankee, and for today's video, this is the next installment in the Yaesu FT-60 operator series. We're just getting started. This is going to be the video where we kind of take a little run around the radio and I show you pretty much how the controls operate on the radio. It'll be a little longer than most of these. Most of these moving forward will be, at or under 5 minutes, somewhere around that zone, because they'll be very topically driven. But in this one, we're going to kind of go around the radio. I don't think I've ever actually done a full review of this radio. I think I've talked about it, but I've never actually done this part. So we'll start where I start with all of the radio reviews. That's at the top of the radio. Now, normally, with a radio that has a separate channel control and volume control knob, I'm going to go to the volume control knob, which is usually the one to the right. But with the FT-60, it's going to be the one in the middle. Now, if I was going to pick nits and literally it is that. This might be my least favorite thing about the FT-60, is that the on-off control is in the center. The reason why is sometimes when you go to adjust the volume, you'll bump the channel control knob and it'll actually switch the channel. It's kind of in an awkward place for turning the radio on and off, but like a lot of radios of this type, there's a little detent there. You turn that and it actually turns the power on, and then turn it all the way to the right, turns it all the way up. This thing, for me at least, likes to live at about 65 or 70% right there. Now, to the right of that channel control knob is going to be a dual function knob, and now this is another sort of weird choice. Normally, if you're going to have a squelch ring, and this does, very few HTs do, they're generally on the volume control knob, but on this one it's on the channel control knob. But this little ring at the bottom here, let me turn to this little ring at the bottom, as you press it going towards the antenna, eventually you're going to start getting into the squelch zone. I usually take it there and bring it down a little bit. Now, what this is handy for, and there's a couple of ways of doing this, and I'll get to it when I get to the Monty button as well, but if you have a station that's not coming in terribly clear and real quick, like you want to flop this thing over so you hear everything coming through, because if you catch like a couple of snippets, then it drops out. If you can do this with a Monty button, but you can also do it with a squelch ring, and just roll that thing all the way over, and it'll remove all the squelch, and you'll hear everything coming across that frequency. Normally, squelch is controlled digitally. Oftentimes, you're going to have an up-down arrow key. This one does not have an up-down arrow key that's going to be useful for that. And you'll go in and adjust it and set it to something like 3 or something like 5. And if you need to, you can go to the Monty button. But for this one, you've got this little ring, so I'll sort of leave it at that. I like it sometimes I don't like it. Now, the channel selector knob at the top just simply rotates through the channels, and this will also be useful when you get to the menu portion for navigating the menu. Now, moving to the left of those buttons, also is an LED indicator here. There's no flashlight, oddly enough, but we have our antenna, and this is going to be, of course, of the proper variety in that it is SMA male on the antenna side, and it's SMA female on the radio side. So what that means is if you screw up putting your antenna on and you bend that center conductor pin, you're only out an antenna and you don't have to send the radio itself back for repair. I've covered this in a separate video as well. The factory antenna is okay. It has a little built-up rubber skirt here that interfaces with the bottom of the antenna connection. But as a lot of you know, if you put an aftermarket antenna on there, you get what's known as the unsightly FT-60 gap. And the real quick fix for that, and I'll put a link in the description where that video is, but there's a little rubber washer or rubber grommet that you can buy from Harbor Freight, or you can search around and find something similarly appropriate that you can put on the base of the antenna. And then when you thread the antenna on, then just push that down, fills that gap nicely. It's going to keep any moisture and dust out of your antenna connection, and also it improves the looks of it slightly, so I'm good to go there. Now, this is the short SRH-701 diamond antenna, and I also use the SRH-77CA quite a lot, which is the whip alternative. I'll talk more about those later, although I think I've done a totally separate video on that already. Moving to the left of the radio, We have our PTT, and the PTT is not hinged. Anywhere you press it, you're going to get activity. It is well protected. You're not going to hear a whole lot of people talking about how they bump their PTT. This thing takes a very positive, direct pressure to make it go. Beneath that, you have two side keys that are not programmable. Now, a lot of people are used to side keys being programmable. These functions are hardwired and you can't really do anything about them. Now, the top side key, or side key 1, it's just known as the Money button. So a short press of this gives you Money, so it removes any applied squelch. And there's another thing that you can do beyond that. If you wanted to hold that open, now of course you could just simply rotate the squelch ring and achieve the same result, or you can short press this FW key, which you're going to get very used to hearing about. FW key at the bottom right corner, if you press that, it'll lock the Money open, so you don't have to hold the button down. Below that, there is, there's a timed backlight on this. If you wanted to activate your backlight, maybe you're sitting there scanning and you're wondering what's going on, or you just want to make sure the radio's on. And it'd be hard to pick up here because this is an amber display and we got a lot of bright lights here. But a short press of that actually turns the display on. You can probably see the illumination from the side there. And just like with the Money button, if you press the FW key and short press that, it'll leave that on and it'll stay on until you short press it again. So that is your side keys. Now moving to the front panel, there's a lot of stuff here for us to get into. One of the more important things that you're going to want to know right off the bat, well, let me cover the easiest thing first, is scan. So which direction do you want it to scan is the first question that you want to ask. So if I want it to scan in an ascending manner, I've got these two arrow keys right here. I'm going to long press that and let go, and it's going to scan upwards. And as you can see here, unlike some of the other radios you might be used to looking at, this thing's got a pretty brisk scan rate. At any point you want to exit from that, just short press the PTT and it'll stop the scan. You want to scan downward, same thing. Just press the lower key. So you long press that, it'll start to scan, and it'll be a descending scan. Not that it really means anything, but there you go. And at any point you want to stop that, just simply short press and you're good to go. Now, entering the set menu. Well, before we get to set menu, let's talk about switching from VFO to memory mode. So I'm currently in memory mode, and I'm actually in a bank status as well. But if I'm in memory mode and I want to go to VFO, the VM key, I just short press that, and it takes me to VFO. Now, there's a number of different bands that this radio receives on. You can cycle through the bands by pressing the band button. Just short press that and it'll take you through all of the different bands. And we'll talk about band scanning later. But there you go. And if I want to go back to memory mode again, I just short press and we're good to go. Now you notice bank popped up. I'm going to talk a lot about memory banks, but one of the more attractive features of this radio is it features the best bank system of any HT ever made. Now this has 1,000 memories available on it. Now when you have 1,000 memories on a radio, scanning through all 1,000 memories can be time consuming even on a fast scan. So you want to be able to organize that large chunk of memories into smaller usable groups. So Yaesu has given you, hold on, excuse me, Yaesu has given you 10 memory banks. Now oftentimes when you're given memory banks, and even in the case of the VX6, it gives you a limit on the number of memories you can put into the bank. The FT-60, and this is one of the things I love about it, it doesn't care at all. You can put one memory in the bank, or you can put all 1,000 memories in a bank. And you can put all 1,000 memories into all 10 banks if you wanted to. That'd be crazy, but you can. You can also apply the same memory channel across all 10 banks, or 3 banks, or 4 banks. So it allows you to build these different banks out for different geographic regions that you might be visiting, or for special events. For instance, if you're on call, like for Aries, for instance, you might have a pre-designated primary repeater, secondary repeater, and 2 simplex side channels for administration. and you might even have a public safety channel that you're scanning. So you can put those 5 memory channels into a specific bank, go to that bank when you're at the event, and the radio will only operate within those, 5 or those handful of memories that you've assigned to that bank. So if you were scanning or just for moving from channel to channel within that bank, it keeps you within that area so you don't end up getting lost and have to go back and find where you were originally. It's an absolutely excellent setup that they did. And to get in and out of banks, that's pretty simple. The band button, you just long press that. And here I'm on bank 1. Now, no bank is all channels on the radio, and then you can cycle through. In this case, I've got 10 banks on here. And let's go to no bank, and then we press VM, and you are good to go. So now we're out of banks, and that was indicated, by the way. Let's get back into banks, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. When you're in a bank, you'll have a little bar to the left of the channel name where it shows bank. And it also shows you at the top, and this is, again, we've got a little bit of shadow here. Yeah, we've got our channel 53. There's actually not a bank number on this one. I thought there was. I think that's the VX6 actually has a bank number. So you sort of don't know what bank you're in at the moment, but it's pretty simple to find out just by long pressing. You can always get out of that. And anytime you want to get out of something, just press a PTT and it'll jump you right out. Now let's talk about how to get into the actual set menu. And then we won't talk about too much more related to the front panel because those will be very specific things we'll deal with later. But to get into the set menu, so you can go in and see the different features that you can set from the front panel, we just short press the FW key, bottom right corner, and then the 0 key, which is your set key. Now, I'm on item number 12, which is DC voltage, but we'll cycle through here. This is the one thing that'll throw you off a little bit when you're switching from one other radio brand to this one, is this is not exactly intuitive as you go through this. All of the same things you're used to doing on other radios can still be carried out, but they're named a lot differently here. And again, we're going back to 2004. Things developed and things got better with not only with other radio companies, Yaesu as well. Feedback from the end users let them know, hey, you need to make this a little easier to use, and so on. And you'll find, for instance, like if you look at the FT-65, their menu system is radically different than the FT-60 and better all the way across the board. It would be something that maybe if they ever did an updated FT-60, a Mark II version, hopefully it would have a more of an FT-65 type menu. But how to exit the menu, of course, just press the PTT and you're out. Now, let's move to the side of the radio. Go ahead and turn it off. This is normally where you have some kind of a cover or flap or something that you have to open. Now, this again is kind of ancient technology. There's better ways of doing it now. If you look in terms of Yaesu evolution, if you compare the FT-65, for instance, it has all of the things that the FT-60 should have had. Those are all developments based on user input. And their speaker mic connection and external DC port are not terrific. How about that? So to make access for your speaker mic, first off, it's a 1-pin connection. So there's no 2 pins. It's not a K1 plug. It's 1 pin. And you get this little piece that sort of folds down out of the way. And then when you go to put it back, it is one of the more frustrating things you'll encounter in your life because you got to get this just right. And in all my years of using this, I've never really found an effective way for easily making this fit. You just fiddle around with it until it finally goes in the hole and sticks. It sucks, but it's something I can live with. How about that? There's also an issue related to the gasketing around your speaker mic connection. Now, when it comes to the FT-60, it doesn't have any IP rating per se. It is early on, the sales literature implied that this thing was probably IP54 at least, because they do talk about it being weather resistant. And I've taken some of these apart. I have a video where you can see the inside of this radio, and there is plenty of gasketing inside that's on par with other radios I've seen that are IP54. So Taking this thing in the rain and out in the elements isn't going to kill the radio, but I would still take precautions to make sure that it's covered up and you don't get it too wet. But there is a little rubber gasket here for when you have the speaker mic plugged in, and it has a nasty tendency of popping out just a little bit. And when it pops out just enough to create an open mic situation. It's the one thing about FT-60s. Well, this really sucks. It's something I know a lot of guys have had this happen to them, and I have been around people when it has happened. I've actually seen it occur where a guy was sitting in his truck, speaker mic worked out just a little bit, and he was just sitting there with an open mic. And we had to track him down and go, hey, your radio's keyed. And look, my radio's not keyed, and we pressed this button in and the channel cleared up. So that will happen. It is the reason, by the way, for things like timeout timers on repeaters and timeout timers on radios themselves. So there's ways around that. I will cover that in a later video on some things you can do to keep that from happening. Now, I'll show you a little trick here. One thing you can do beneath the speaker mic connection is a DC port. And what the DC port is not for charging. It is for running something like this, which is an alternative DC power supply. So you could hook this up in your car and run this into this port, and it doesn't use the juice out of the battery. It also doesn't charge it though. Now, early versions of the FT-60 would charge it. But at one point, I don't know exactly what year they did it, they set it up so that the only way that FT-60s moving forward could be charged was through the charge cradle. I'm sure there was a good reason for doing so. It would be nice to have both. It would be nice to have the ability to still charge it on board, but it doesn't. So something to be aware of. But there's a little trick that you can do for your speaker mic that'll be somewhat helpful. If you undo those and you turn this, you can easily then access those ports and sort of leave them alone. So this isn't always applying any side pressure to the speaker mic. And in some cases, I'm going to have to check to see on the removal. I've actually never pulled one of these off of mine. I don't know if it would mess it up or destroy it or not. We'll see. Maybe I'll play with that later. But yeah, we'll cover the issues related to the speaker mic port later. Now moving to the back of the radio, one of the best belt clips in the business. This thing is absolutely rock solid. It's very sturdy. Now you have your two little holes here. Those are to install the screws, but this can also be used as a lanyard loop. So you can use those two holes to loop a lanyard through there if you're so inclined to do so. Now we get to the battery compartment. We've got a mechanical battery latch here that doesn't rely on any springs or detents or anything. It's just pure friction. So you have this little piece that locks onto that little nub, and it's just leverage and pressure that holds the battery in. And it works. I've dropped these a few times and I've never had a battery pop loose. Once you pop that open, you just lift the battery out and it reveals the factory battery pack is 1400 milliamp and it is a nickel metal hydride. It is not lithium ion. Of course, no USB-C charge port. Another thing you'll note, heavy. There are some special charge considerations related to nickel metal hydride batteries that you got to kind of watch for so that you don't develop a set. I'll cover that later. Battery contacts are at the top here and here. And then inside, again, like I said, I've had one of these taken apart, and I invite you to look at the video where I do take one of these apart. Because what had happened was actually I had implied that this was a little more metal than I thought it was, and it turned out it was plastic. My bad. I had it confused with another radio when I did the video. But yeah, the FT-60, while it is a plastic construction, it is solid as a rock. This thing feels literally like a brick. I think the analogy I used with my son-in-law all the way back in the day when we were at Disneyland was you could hold one of these in your hand and punch your way through a drywall wall pretty effectively if you needed to hand the radio to someone in another room. It's a beefy son of a gun, but it's a beauty. So those are the basic control functions. Now I'm going to go ahead and end the video at this point. What we're going to do is come back and we're going to talk about some things to set up on the radio, some initial setup stuff that you're going to want to do. I think that's the next one. in the rotation. It might not be, don't hold me to that, but usually the next thing I do is I talk about the initial setup things that you want to do. Oh, I know what it is. Before we get to that, we do a full factory reset on the radio, because I have this one all programmed up with my local stuff. So we're going to come back and do a full factory reset on the radio and kind of restore it to its original configuration that you'll receive it out of the package. And then we'll go through and start looking at some of the things you're going to want to add and subtract to the radio to make it work a little better for you. So with that, I will bring it to a close. Thank you for watching or listening. This is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee from Visalia, California. Have a wonderful day.